ثم كلي من كل الثمرات فاسلكي سبل ربك ذللا يخرج من بطونها شراب مختلف ألوانه فيه شفاء للناس إن في ذلك لآية لقوم يتفكرون.
Then suck the juice of every kind of fruit, and keep treading the ways of your Lord, which have been made easy. There comes forth from their bellies a drink varied in colors, wherein there is a healing for men. Verily, there is a sign in this for those who reflect.
57. Follow the ways of your Lord, means work in accordance with the methods which have been taught to thee by Allah's wahi for the smooth running of hive life. It is Allah's wahi, instinctive inspiration, that has taught the bees how to build their wonderful factory with separate combs to rear brood, combs to turn nectar into honey, combs to store food, in short, separate combs to fulfill every aspect of hive life. It is wahi that has taught the bees how to organize themselves into a cooperative society for collective effort to run the factory with the queen and thousands of workers to perform a variety of specific tasks. All these things have been made so smooth for them by wahi that the bees never feel the necessity of ever thinking about it. They have been running smoothly their factory with their collective effort for thousands of years with perfect accuracy. 58. Though honey is a wholesome food with a sweet taste and has medicinal power as well, its latter quality has been mentioned only because the former is too obvious. It is used as a medicine to cure several diseases because it contains the juice and glucose of flowers and fruits in the best form. Besides this, it is also used in preparing and preserving other medicines because it does not rot. It also preserves other things from decay. That is why it has been used for centuries as a substitute for alcohol. And if the beehive is built at a place which abounds in certain medicinal herbs, its honey does not remain mere honey, but becomes also the essence of that herb. It is expected that if bees are used methodically for extracting essence from herbs, that essence will prove to be much better than the one obtained in the laboratories. 59. This passage, ayats 48 to 69, contains proofs of Tawheed and life after death. These were necessitated, for the disbelievers and the mushriks were bitterly opposed to the Prophet, peace be upon him, mainly because of these two doctrines. The acceptance of the first doctrine demolished the whole system of life based on shirk or atheism because to acknowledge Allah to be the sole provider, the helper and the protector left no room for the worship of any god or goddess. The proof of Tawheed is based on the observance of the structure of Thay. Cattle, the bees, the date palms and vineyards and their usefulness to mankind. Naturally the question arises, who has designed these in the manner and for the purpose they have been created? The only obvious answer is that it is the all-wise and all-beneficent Allah who has designed all these things for the benefit of mankind to produce such varieties of food that are so wholesome and so tasty. The Prophet, therefore, rightly demanded, when you yourselves admit, and you cannot but admit, that it is Allah alone who has provided milk, honey, dates, grapes and the like, He and none but He is worthy of your worship, praise, gratitude and allegiance. Why do you then insist on making offerings to your self-made gods and goddesses? The second doctrine to which the disbelievers took strong objection was that there is surely the life after death. They were against this doctrine for its acceptance changed the whole moral system and they were not prepared to change their immoral ways. Their objection was based on the presumption that it was impossible to bring to life anyone after death. They have been asked to observe that the barren land, which once had been covered with vegetable life, was again covered with it after rainfall and they have been watching such repetition of life year after year. That Allah, who could so easily bring to life the dead vegetable, could do the same and bring to life all the dead without any difficulty at all.
وَاللَّهُ خَلَقَكُمْ ثُمَّ يَتَوَفَّاكُمْ وَمِنكُم مَّن يُرَدُّ إِلَى أَرْذَلِ الْعُمُرِ لِكَيْ لَا يَعْلَمَ بَعْدَ عِلْمٍ شَيْئًا إِنَّ اللَّهَ عَلِيمٌ قَدِيرٌ.
Allah has created you, and then He causes you to die. Some of you have your lives prolonged to an abject old age, when one loses all knowledge after having acquired it. Allah is all-knowing, all-powerful.
60. It is to emphasize this, Allah not only provides you with the necessities and good things of life, as stated in the preceding verses, but also has full power over your life and death. None else has any power to give life or cause death. 61. This fact has been mentioned to bring home to the disbelievers and the mushriks that knowledge, which gives superiority to man over all creatures on this earth, has been given by Allah, as if to say, you yourselves have seen that when a man, who once possessed much knowledge, becomes very old, he is reduced to a mere lump of flesh. Then that man who once taught knowledge to others loses all his senses and cannot look even after his own self.
والله فضل بعضكم على بعض في الرزق فما الذين فضلوا براد رزقهم على ما ملكت أيمانهم فهم فيه سواء أفبنعمة الله يجحدون.
Allah has favored some of you with more worldly provisions than others. Then, those who are more favored do not give away their provisions to their slaves, lest they become equal sharers in it. Do they then deny the favor of Allah?
62. It will be worthwhile to give deep thought to the meanings of this verse, for some modern commentators of the Quran have founded strange economic theories and systems on it. Their interpretation is an instance of perverting the meaning of the Quran by isolating verses from their context and treating it as a separate whole in order to formulate a new philosophy and law of Islamic economics. In their opinion, the verse implies this: those people to whom Allah has given more provisions than others, should share these equally with their servants and slaves. Otherwise they shall be guilty of ingratitude to Allah in regard to the wealth with which He had blessed them. This commentary on the verse is obviously wrong and far-fetched because in the context it occurs there is no mention at all of any law of economics. The whole passage in which this verse occurs deals with the refutation of shirk and proof of Tawheed. The same themes are continued in the subsequent verses. There seems to be no reason why an economic law should have been inserted here, which would have been absolutely irrelevant, to say the least. On the contrary, when the verse is considered in its context, it becomes quite obvious that it is no more than the statement of a fact to prove the same theme that is contained in this passage. It argues like this: when you yourselves do not make your servants and slaves equal partners in your wealth, which in fact is given to you by Allah, how is it that you join other gods with God in your gratitude to Him for the favors with which He has blessed you? You know that these gods have no powers to bestow anything on anyone, and, therefore, have no right in your worship of Allah, for they are after all His slaves and servants. This interpretation of the verse under discussion is corroborated by Surah Ar-Rum, Ayat 28. Allah sets forth to you an instance from your own selves. Do your slaves share with you the wealth we have bestowed on you so that you and they become equals in this? And do you fear them as you fear one another? Thus we make clear our signs to those who use their common sense. A comparison of the two verses makes it quite clear that these have been cited to bring home to the mushriks that they themselves do not associate their slaves with themselves in their wealth and status, but they have the impudence and folly to set up his own creature as partner with God. It appears that the erroneous interpretation has been strengthened by the succeeding sentence. What? Do they then deny to acknowledge Allah's favor? As this sentence immediately follows the similitude of the rich people and their slaves, they conclude that it will be ingratitude on the part of those who possess more wealth not to share it equally with those who have less. As a matter of fact, everyone who has studied the Quran critically knows that ingratitude to Allah is to show gratitude to others than Allah for His blessings. This interpretation is so patently wrong that those who are well versed in the teachings of the Quran can have no misconception about it. And such verses as these can mislead only those who have a cursory knowledge of the Quran. Now that the significance of the ingratitude towards Allah's blessing has become plain, the meaning of the verse will be quite clear, and it is this: When the mushriks understand the implication of the difference between the master and his slave and observe this distinction in their own lives, why do they then persist in ignoring the immense difference between the Creator and His creatures and set up the latter as His partners and pay homage of gratitude to them for the blessings bestowed on them by Allah?
والله جعل لكم من أنفسكم أزواجا وجعل لكم من أزواجكم بنين وحفدة ورزقكم من الطيبات أفبالباطل يؤمنون وبنعمة الله هم يكفرون.
And Allah has given you spouses from your kind, and has granted you through your spouses sons and grandsons, and has provided you wholesome things as sustenance. After knowing all this, do they still believe in falsehood and deny Allah's bounty?
63. Is then in falsehood that they believe, they have this false and baseless belief that there are certain gods and goddesses, jinns and saints, dead and alive, who possess the power to make or mar their fates, fulfill their desires and answer their prayers, give them children, cure their diseases and help them win lawsuits. 64. In the bounty of Allah that they disbelieve, by associating others with Allah in offering gratitude to Him for His favors, though they did not have any proof or authority that their false gods had played any part in regard to those favors. The Quran considers such an association to be the denial of Allah's favors. It puts forward the fundamental principle. It is the denial of the favor of the real benefactor to offer gratitude for his favor to anyone who has not done that favor, or to presume without any proof or reason that the real benefactor has not granted that favor of his own accord but because of the mediation or regard or recommendation or intercession of this or that person.
وَيَعْبُدُونَ مِن دُونِ اللَّهِ مَا لَا يَمْلِكُ لَهُمْ رِزْقًا مِنَ السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضِ شَيْئًا وَلَا يَسْتَطِيعُونَ.
And worship instead of Allah those helpless beings who have no control over providing them any sustenance from the heavens and the earth. Do you worship those who have no power to do anything of this sort?
فَلَا تَضْرِبُوا لِلَّهِ الْأَمْثَالَ إِنَّ اللَّهَ يَعْلَمُ وَأَنْتُمْ لَا تَعْلَمُونَ.
So do not strike any similitudes to Allah. Allah knows whereas you do not know.
65. So do not make up any similitude for Allah. You should not compare Allah with others nor consider Him to be unapproachable like worldly kings and rulers, to whom none can have access without the mediation and intercession of their courtiers and servants. As Allah is not surrounded by angels, saints, favorites, etc. Everyone can have direct access to Him without mediation by anyone.
ضرب الله مثلا عبدا مملوكا لا يقدر على شيء ومن رزقناه منا رزقا حسنا فهو ينفق منه سرا وجهرا هل يستوون الحمد لله بل أكثرهم لا يعلمون.
Allah sets forth a parable. There is one who is a slave and is owned by another and has no power over anything. And there is one whom we have granted good provision ourselves, of which he spends both secretly and openly. Can they be equal? All praise be to Allah, but most of them do not even know this simple fact.
66. In the preceding verse, the mushriks were told not to make comparisons between Allah and His creatures, for there is nothing like Him. As the bases of their comparison were wrong, their conclusions were also misleading. In this verse appropriate similitude have been cited and right comparisons have been made to lead them to reality. T67. Between the last question and praise be to Allah, there is a gap which is to be filled with the help of the latter. When the question was posed, obviously the mushriks could not say that the two men were equal. So some of them would have admitted that they were not equal, while the others would have kept quiet for fear that in case of admission, they would have to abide by its logical conclusion, that is, the admission of refutation of the doctrine of shirk. Therefore, the words, praise be to Allah, have been put in the mouth of the Prophet, peace be upon him, in answer to both kinds of the response to the question. In the first case, it would mean, praise be to Allah, you have admitted at least so much. In the second case, it would mean, praise be to Allah, you have kept quiet in spite of all your obduracy and have not had the audacity to say that both were equal. 68. But most of them do not know this simple thing, that while they feel and carefully observe the distinction between those who have powers and those who are powerless, they neither feel nor observe the clear distinction between the Creator and His creation. That is why they associate the creatures with the Creator in His attributes and powers and show the kind of allegiance to them as is the exclusive right of the Creator. The pity is that in their everyday life, they would beg for something from the master of the house and not from the servants, but in contrast to this, they would beg for their needs from the servants of Allah and not from Him.
All praise be to Allah. With regard to their response, the Prophet thanks God that despite their obduracy, the polytheists were unable to say that the two were equal, and thus failed to find any fault with the basic premise of monotheism.
وضرب الله مثلا الرجلين أحدهما أبكم لا يقدر على شيء وهو كل على مولاه أينما يوجهه لا يأت بخير هل يستوي هو ومن يأمر بالعدل وهو على صراط مستقيم.
Allah sets forth another parable. There are two men, one of whom is dumb, and he has no power over anything. He is a burden to his master, and wheresoever his master directs him, he fails to bring forth any good. Can such a person be the equal of one who enjoins justice and himself follows the right way?
69. In the first similitude, distinction between Allah and false gods has been made clear in regard to the possession of powers and the lack of these. In the second one, the emphasis is on the use of those powers. Allah is not only all-powerful, but also hears all the prayers and fulfills all the needs, while the slave is utterly powerless. He does not and cannot hear prayers, nor can make a response to them, nor has the power to do anything at all. He is totally dependent on the master and quite incapable of doing anything by himself. On the other hand, the master is all-powerful and all-wise. He enjoins justice on the world. Whatever he does is right and accurate. Ask them, is it then a point of wisdom to regard such master and such a slave as equal?
وَلِلَّهِ غَيْبُ السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضِ وَمَا أَمْرُ السَّاعَةِ إِلَّا كَلَمْحِ الْبَصَرِ أَوْ هُوَ أَقْرَبُ إِنَّ اللَّهَ عَلَى كُلِّ شَيْءٍ قَدِيرٌ.
Allah has full knowledge of the truths beyond the reach of perception, both in the heavens and the earth. And the coming of the hour will take no more than the twinkling of an eye. It may take even less. Indeed, Allah has power over everything.
70. The subsequent sentence shows that this is the answer to a question which was frequently put to the Prophet, peace be upon him, by the disbelievers of Mecca. The question which has not been cited was this: if the resurrection so often you talk of is really coming, let us know the date of its coming. 71. That is, don't be under the delusion that the resurrection will come gradually and take a long time. You will neither be able to see it coming at a distance nor guard against it and make preparations to meet it. For it will come suddenly without any previous notice, in the twinkling of an eye, or even will take less time than this. Therefore, now is the time to consider this matter seriously and to decide about your attitude towards it. You should not depend upon this false hope that there is still a long time in the coming of the resurrection and you will set matters right with Allah when you will see it coming. It may be pointed out that the resurrection has been mentioned here during the discussion on Tawheed in order to warn the people that the choice between the doctrines of Tawheed and Shirk is not merely a theoretical question. For that choice determines different courses of life for which they will be called to account on the day of resurrection. They have also been warned that it will come all of a sudden at some unknown time. Therefore, they should be very careful to make that choice which will determine their success or failure on that day.